In the heart of Los Angeles, long before the city was blanketed in TikTok dreams and Netflix billboards, a different kind of empire was quietly taking shape.
Are you serious?
It didn't rise from Beverly Hills or Silicon Beach. It rose from the shadows of the Rampart District. Cracked sidewalks, over-policed alleyways, and entire blocks forgotten by the American dream. That's where the legend of 18th Street began. They called themselves Barrio 18, the 18th Street Gang. But they weren't always known by that name. And at first, they weren't even a gang. As always, before diving into the full story, please consider hitting the like button to support ADB Crime Case. Don't forget to subscribe to get notified about our latest investigations. Now let's begin. It started in the 1960s, during a time when Los Angeles was already boiling over with racial tension and turf warfare. Back then, the city's Hispanic street gangs were tribal and exclusive, especially the notorious Clanton 14. They were old-school, second-generation Mexican Americans, and they didn't take kindly to outsiders, not even other Latinos who didn't meet their narrow definition of Mexican blood. For a new wave of immigrant kids, mostly from Mexico and Central America, trying to find their footing in a country that didn't want them, Clanton 14's rules were a locked door. But one faction within the gang had a bold idea. What if they started a new clique, one that welcomed everyone? They called it Clanton 18th Street. But change doesn't come easy, especially in gangland. The idea was quickly rejected, and the rebels were cast out. What happened next is now part of LA's street lore. Those outcasts didn't walk away. They doubled down. From rejection, they created revolution. From exile, they built an empire. The 18th Street Gang, or simply 18, was born not just out of anger, but out of vision. While other gangs closed their doors to newcomers, 18 flung theirs wide open. Black, brown, Asian, if you were tough, loyal, and angry at the world, you were family. This multi-ethnic foundation would become their superpower, and over time, their numbers would swell into the tens of thousands. At first, they were just another crew carving out territory in the crowded gangland map of LA, but they were scrappy, ruthless, relentless. And they grew fast, too fast for anyone to ignore. They didn't just survive, they evolved. And as they fought for turf against more established Hispanic gangs, their strategy shifted. They recruited outside the Hispanic community, drawing in anyone who felt like they didn't belong anywhere else. In a city that already feared the rise of Black and Latino power movements, this inclusive approach felt like an insurgency. And that's exactly what it was. By the late 1980s and early 90s, 18th Street had exploded, not just in numbers, but in influence. The streets of LA weren't just marked by graffiti anymore. They were battlefields, and the number 18 wasn't just inked on skin. It was tattooed into the soul of entire neighborhoods. They had no official flag, no government, no constitution. But make no mistake, 18th Street was a nation of its own, and it was growing, block by block, city by city. From North Hollywood to Pico Union, South LA to Koreatown, Inglewood to Long Beach, their presence spread like wildfire. Their enemies, especially Clanton 14, watched in disbelief as the very kids they once rejected built something bigger, badder, and far more terrifying. What started as a handful of immigrant kids looking for belonging would soon become one of the most feared criminal networks in the Western Hemisphere. And this was just the beginning. By the early 1990s, the 18th Street Gang was no longer just a street corner problem. It was a rising storm, scattered, adaptable, and impossible to pin down. You couldn't map them out like a single cartel. There was no central headquarters, no iron-fisted boss calling shots from a mansion in the hills. Instead, they operated like a swarm, decentralized, unpredictable, and always moving. By the time law enforcement figured out where one clique was based, 3 more had already popped up across town. Each faction, or clique, acted like its own war camp. Same name, same number, but different leaders, different rules. From the packed apartment buildings of Westlake to the cracked sidewalks of South Central, from the neon glow of Koreatown to the working-class homes of Riverside. The name 18th Street echoed across all of them. Different battlegrounds, same flag. It wasn't just Los Angeles anymore. Like smoke slipping through cracks in a wall, 18th Street began to drift, spreading first across California, then state by state, city by city. By the time federal agents took serious notice, they were already entrenched in 20 states and 44 major cities across America. You could find them in Nevada, Texas, Maryland, New York, even as far north as Washington State. But it wasn't just migration. It was deportation that would trigger the next evolution and unleash something far darker. When U.S. authorities arrested 18th Street members and deported them back to their home countries, particularly El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, they didn't realize they were seeding something monstrous. These weren't just gang members going home. These were war-hardened criminals, trained in the streets of L.A., landing in countries already riddled with poverty, fractured police forces, and barely functioning governments. And the moment their boots hit Central American soil, they didn't disappear. They took over. 18th Street's arrival in El Salvador was like dropping a lit match into dry brush. Within years, they had built a new empire of violence, one that rivaled and eventually clashed with another rising power, MS-13. The two gangs would go on to wage a war so brutal, so widespread, that the United Nations once called Central America's Northern Triangle, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, the most dangerous region in the world outside of an active war zone. But even in the chaos, 18th Street maintained its blueprint. Divide, decentralize, dominate. In El Salvador, members began splitting into new factions. The two most dominant? Los Revolucionarios, the revolutionaries, and Los Sureños, the Southerners. Once brothers in ink, they became bitter rivals, turning internal disputes into street executions. Turf battles turned cities into war zones. Entire neighborhoods became no-go zones, ruled not by law, but by la calle, the street. And while the violence scorched through Central America, the original cliques in Los Angeles adapted again. They morphed, rebranded, survived federal raids and RICO cases. For every member arrested, 3 more were ready to fill the void. The FBI and the ATF knew the threat had gone transnational. What started in a forgotten pocket of Los Angeles was now a hydra. Cut off one head, and 3 more would rise in its place. What made them so hard to stop? They weren't just criminals. They were a community. They held parties, raised children, buried their dead, and protected their own. To some, they were family. To others, They were monsters. But everyone agreed on one thing. You didn't mess with Barrio 18, and if you did, you'd better pray they didn't find out where you lived. If you ask a federal agent what makes the 18th Street gang so hard to dismantle, they won't talk about weapons or numbers first. They'll talk about structure. Because unlike traditional organized crime groups, with their strict hierarchies and aging godfathers, 18th Street is built like a living organism. It flexes, adapts, and regenerates. And no two factions are exactly alike. In Los Angeles, the gang runs like a loose federation of cliques, autonomous units that operate under the same name but follow their own codes. One clique might deal in drugs and stolen cars, while another is focused on extortion and street-level enforcement. Some are vicious and militaristic. Others are more about survival, protection, and neighborhood control. But don't mistake the lack of centralized leadership for weakness. Inside each clique is a command chain, street-tested and brutal. At the top sits the palabrero, the shot caller, the man whose word is law. Sometimes he's out in the open, walking free, but often he's behind bars, controlling operations from prison through coded messages, cell phones smuggled in through laundry, or visitors who leave with more than just hugs. Below him are lieutenants, trusted homies who manage day-to-day business, drug drops, money collections, street justice. Then come the soldados, the soldiers, young, hungry, and eager to prove loyalty. These are the ones who carry out hits, protect turf, and enforce gang discipline. Their currency is violence. Their reputation is earned in blood. And finally, there are the collaborators, civilians who aren't jumped in, but play critical support roles. They stash weapons, move drugs, scout police activity, or even drive getaway cars. They're invisible, untraceable, and just as dangerous. In Central America, the hierarchy is even more militarized. Leaders are called toros, bulls. Beneath each toro is a regional network of conchas, courts, and tribes, mimicking the divisions of modern armies. Each territory is run like a war zone: command and control, surveillance, discipline, retribution. And if you're imagining that this is a man's world, think again. Women can join Barrio 18, but the entry fee is brutal. There are 3 paths. Take an 18-second beatdown from multiple members, engage in forced sexual initiation, or be the girlfriend of a member and slowly earn status over time. Once in, the role isn't passive. Female members are expected to carry weapons, handle drugs, and in many cases, commit acts of violence. But they're also tasked with maternal roles: cooking, hiding fugitives, and caring for the sick or injured. Inside the gang, the line between soldier and caregiver is blurry. But outside the gang, there's no blur. There's fear. Members are bound by an iron code. Disobedience, disrespect, or disloyalty can cost you everything. And punishments aren't symbolic. They're savage. A violation could earn you an 18-second beating. More serious offenses, like snitching or theft, often end in execution. This code, enforced by blood, is what keeps the 18th Street gang alive. Law enforcement may arrest 100, deport 1,000, raid 12 homes. But as long as that code is respected, as long as the numbers 1 and 8 still mean something on the streets, the gang survives. Because Barrio 18 isn't just a name on a rap sheet. It's a culture, a tribe, a nation without borders. And for every city they touch, the question isn't if they'll be back. It's when. In the world of Barrio 18, Identity isn't just something you wear, it's something you bleed for. Forget gangsta rap cliches and movie stereotypes. This isn't about sagging jeans or flashing hand signs for clout. For 18th Street members, culture is sacred. It's survival. It's loyalty written in ink, stitched into clothing, and burned into the psyche from the moment you're jumped in. And it starts with the number 18. You'll find it everywhere. Carved into park benches, sprayed on freeway underpasses, tattooed on skin like a badge of allegiance. Sometimes it's in Roman numerals, 18. Sometimes it's hidden in symbols, X8, 666, or the infamous 3 dots, known as My Vita Loca, my crazy life. But it always means the same thing. I belong to the streets. Their chosen colors say even more. Blue to honor the Mexican mafia, the prison-based puppet master that once dictated much of California's gang hierarchy. Black to represent the gang's original roots, its identity forged in dark alleys and shadowed corners of LA. And then there's the wardrobe, a walking code of allegiance. If you're in LA and you see someone wearing Los Angeles Clippers gear, or a Dodgers jersey, or even repping the Las Vegas Raiders, look closer. These aren't just sports fans. These are uniforms, symbols, street-approved camouflage. And to the trained eye, the message is clear. I ride with 18, but it doesn't stop with colors or codes. For many 18th Street members, especially in Central America, identity becomes something far more permanent. In El Salvador, it's not uncommon to see young men with full facial tattoos, enormous 18 numerals stretching from eyebrow to chin. In some cases, the ink covers their entire face, turning them into walking billboards of fear, loyalty, and desperation. The more visible the tattoo, the deeper the commitment. The more extreme the ink, the more respected or feared you become. And once you wear the brand, there's no walking away. This extreme visual identity serves a purpose. It marks territory. It instills fear. It makes it impossible for rivals, cops, or even civilians to mistake who you are. But it also serves as a one-way ticket. A man with a full-face Barrio 18 tattoo can't hide. He can't flee. He can't even apply for a job or walk through an airport unnoticed. That kind of ink is a lifetime sentence. Not in prison, but in society. And maybe that's the point. Because inside Barrio 18, the idea of escape is a myth. Loyalty is everything, and punishment for betrayal? That's where the culture gets darker. The gang's internal justice system is swift and savage. Miss a payment? Disobey an order? Show weakness? Expect an 18-second beating. A ritual that's more than just a test. It's a reminder. You belong to us. And for those who cross the line too far, snitches, deserters, rivals, there's only one way out: a bullet. Still, for many members, especially the younger ones, the gang offers something they've never had before: family. 18th Street throws parties, hosts cookouts, and watches each other's kids. They celebrate birthdays. They mourn losses. They rally when a member goes down. And in the cold, concrete corners of a city that doesn't care if you live or die, that kind of loyalty can feel like salvation. But that's the paradox of Barrio 18. It gives you belonging and takes your soul. It offers protection and invites constant danger. It makes you feel powerful and marks you for life. It is a culture built on contradictions, on color and blood, on pride and punishment. And for thousands of young men and women across the Americas, it's not just a gang. It's everything. At its core, The 18th Street Gang is more than just a street gang. It's a business, a brutal, unregulated, and highly adaptable enterprise built not on contracts and stock options, but on fear, loyalty, and violence. Their product? Whatever sells. Cocaine, marijuana, heroin, methamphetamine. While other criminal organizations fight over territory or struggle with internal politics, 18th Street flows like water, quick to move, faster to adapt. Their bread and butter is street-level drug distribution, a trade that pours millions into the gang's war chest every year. They don't own the farms or control the borders. But when it comes to the block, the last mile, 18th Street dominates. Corner by corner, alley by alley. One addict at a time. But drugs are just the beginning. Car theft, chop shops, identity fraud, extortion, weapons trafficking, prostitution, copyright piracy, arson, kidnapping, human smuggling, murder for hire. If it makes money and it's illegal, Barrio 18 has its hands in it. And they've gotten good, very good, at making chaos profitable. Extortion alone brings in a staggering amount of money in Central America. In cities like Guatemala City and San Salvador, bus drivers are routinely threatened, beaten, or even killed if they don't pay the daily la renta, a fee demanded by the gang for simply existing in their territory. It's not just drivers, store owners, teachers, janitors, street vendors. If you make money, you owe a piece to 18th Street, and if you don't pay, you disappear. The threat is so pervasive that some businesses have shut down completely, unable to afford the extortion fees. Others keep two sets of books, one for the government and one for the gang. And while the violence in Central America is headline-worthy, don't think for a second that the U.S. cliques are any less lethal. In 1998, the gang made national news when an 18th Street member, Catarino Gonzalez, executed LAPD officer Filbert Cuesta, shot him in the back of the head while he sat in his patrol car. It was a message, a warning, a chilling reminder that they were willing to kill not just civilians, but cops. More recently, in 2019, a bloody scene unfolded in a Queens subway station where an 18th Street member was gunned down by a rival MS-13 gangster. It was broad daylight, public, cinematic. But to these gangs, it was just another day in a war that never sleeps. And this war doesn't stop at national borders. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, 18th Street, along with MS-13, has turned the Northern Triangle into the most homicidal region in the world outside of active war zones. Cities like San Pedro Sula in Honduras have earned grim nicknames, the murder capital of the world. So how does a decentralized gang with no single leader maintain such ruthless power? Through one unbreakable rule: fear equals control. They don't need a boardroom or a CEO. Their boardroom is a prison cell. Their CEO might be a palabrero calling shots from a payphone in El Salvador. Their enforcers? Kids barely old enough to drive, but old enough to kill. And in a twisted way, the violence is self-sustaining. The more blood they spill, the more respect they earn. The more chaos they cause, the tighter they grip their territories. Fear, after all, doesn't require loyalty. It only requires silence. For the communities caught in the crossfire, life becomes a game of survival. Don't talk. Don't look. Don't ask questions. Because in places ruled by Barrio 18, justice doesn't come from a courtroom. It comes from the barrel of a gun. By the early 2000s, the writing was on the wall, and in most cases, it was literally sprayed across it. 18, 666. Mi vida loca. The symbols of 18th Street weren't just graffiti tags anymore. They were battle flags. And law enforcement had had enough. The gang had grown from local nuisance to international menace. And while police departments in Los Angeles struggled to contain the violence, the threat was spreading. Eastward across the U.S., south into Central America, and even overseas to countries as far as Germany, France, Australia, and the Philippines. It was no longer a street gang. It was a movement. And that's when Uncle Sam went to war. The FBI, ATF, ICE, DEA, and dozens of local police agencies launched sweeping operations across the country. Task forces were created. Wiretaps were deployed. Informants were flipped. Undercover agents embedded themselves into cliques. The goal was clear: dismantle 18th Street from the inside out. Federal indictments rolled in. SWAT teams kicked down doors at dawn. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of gang members were arrested across California, Texas, New York, Virginia, and Maryland. For a moment, it looked like the government had struck a decisive blow. But 18th Street had seen this coming. Their secret weapon: deportation. You see, every time a member was arrested and deported, it didn't weaken the gang, it exported it. In the U.S., prisons were overcrowded and monitored. But in countries like El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, many prisons were barely run by the government. In some cases, they were controlled by the inmates themselves. So when U.S. authorities deported thousands of hardened gang members back to the Northern Triangle, they weren't stopping the threat. They were planting it, like a virus, in places already on the brink of collapse. Inside these crumbling prison systems, 18th Street flourished. Behind bars, their leaders, the palabreros, were untouchable. They ran operations from within, using smuggled phones and corrupt guards to control street-level crime outside. Extortion calls were made from solitary confinement. Hit orders were texted from plastic phones hidden in rectums. And on the outside, their soldiers carried out the violence with terrifying efficiency. Entire neighborhoods became occupied zones. Children were recruited. Bus drivers were executed. Rivals were dismembered and dumped as warnings. Police officers were ambushed. Journalists were silenced. Politicians were bought or eliminated. Internationally, the United Nations, Interpol, and even Europol began monitoring the spread. 18th Street was now considered one of the most violent and organized transnational gangs on Earth. And still, even after all the raids, arrests, and mass deportations, they didn't collapse. Because for every clique dismantled, another one rose in its place. For every palabrero jailed, a younger one stepped up, hungrier, meaner, more loyal. And for every city that drove them underground, another opened its doors. Washington Heights, Houston, Miami, Chicago, Atlanta, in city after city, the story repeated itself. Graffiti shows up, drug deals follow, gunshots echo through alleyways, and suddenly the neighborhood belongs to Barrio 18. Law enforcement adapted. Intelligence units got smarter. Tech surveillance improved. Anti-gang initiatives expanded into schools and community centers. But for all the pressure, one uncomfortable truth remained. You can't arrest your way out of this, because 18th Street was never just about crime. It was about belonging, power, identity, family. And until those deeper needs are addressed, until poverty, inequality, and hopelessness are confronted, the gang will always find recruits. They'll always find the next angry kid. the next broken home, the next neighborhood no one cares about, except them. There's a street in Los Angeles where the number 18 is still etched into a brick wall, half faded, covered in newer tags, forgotten by most, but not by everyone. For some, that wall is a memory, a warning, a grave. Because the story of the 18th Street Gang didn't end with the arrests, or the deportations, or the headlines. It didn't end with the drug busts, or the body bags, or the courtroom convictions. It didn't end at all. It became something else. A cycle. A kid gets jumped in at 13. He wears the ink. He learns the rules. He watches his friends die, his enemies fall, and the cops drive past without a second glance. He knows the gang is dangerous, but it's also the only family he has. He survives, maybe even thrives, until he's arrested and deported to a country he barely remembers. A place where the streets are hotter, the rules are harsher, and the war never really stops. So he becomes what he knows. A soldier, a leader, a ghost of a nation that never wanted him in the first place. And so the cycle continues. From Los Angeles to San Salvador, from Houston to Honduras, from the courts of El Salvador to the courtyards of U.S. prisons. Barrio 18 is more than a gang now. It's a system, one that feeds on poverty, migration, racism, abandonment, and violence. It finds the cracks in broken societies and fills them with blood and brotherhood. Even as international law enforcement works to dismantle its global footprint, the truth is more complicated. In the neighborhoods where 18th Street rules, they aren't always seen as villains. Sometimes they're protectors. They stop petty crime. They distribute food. They mediate disputes. They sponsor soccer teams for kids with no one else to believe in them. They offer respect in a world that offers none. But that respect comes with a cost paid in silence, in obedience, in fear. It's easy to write off gangs like Barrio 18 as monsters, and in many ways, they are. They've killed innocent people. They've tortured, trafficked, and terrorized. They've built an empire on pain, but the deeper truth is harder to face. They were made, not born. Made by a system that deports without reintegrating. Made by poverty that lasts for generations. Made by countries that value incarceration more than education. Made by families shattered by war, migration, and neglect. And now, as governments scramble to contain the beast they helped unleash, the next generation is already watching. They see the tattoos, the guns, the money, the fear. They see the headlines, the documentaries, the Netflix specials. And some of them, the ones society forgot, don't see a warning. They see a roadmap. Because in the eyes of a child born into chaos, the gang isn't the problem. It's the only thing that works. So what now? Do we build more prisons? Send more troops? Fund more raids? Or do we finally ask the harder question? Not how to destroy the gang, but how to destroy the need for it. Until then, the 18th Street Gang will continue. Not because of what it is, but because of what we allow the world around it to remain.